I didn't tell him what I actually did for a living. Not the real version anyway. When my brother asked, I said I worked in the trades. He nodded the way people nod when they're not really listening, and the conversation moved on. That was fine. That was normal. That had been normal for years. My brother's name is Kevin. He's 3 years older than me, works at a financial services firm in downtown Calgary, and has spent the better part of a decade believing that a desk job is the only job worth having. He didn't say that out loud, usually. He didn't have to. It came through in the way he talked about his colleagues, the ones with MBAs, the ones who got promoted, the ones buying condos in Beltline. It came through in the way he went quiet whenever anyone asked me about work at family dinners. I'm a certified journeyman electrician. I run my own company now. We do commercial and industrial work, mostly office builds, warehouse retrofits, the occasional large-scale renovation contract. I have 6 people on my crew and a project manager who handles scheduling, so I can focus on bidding. I didn't start out that way. I started out as an apprentice at 20, hauling wire through unfinished walls in -30 weather, wondering if I made a mistake. That phase lasted about a year. The doubt, I mean. The cold never really goes away. But Kevin didn't know any of that, and neither, until recently, did his girlfriend. Her name was Simone. He'd been seeing her for about 8 months before he brought her to meet the family. My mother called me in early December to let me know that Kevin would be bringing Simone to the holiday dinner. A big deal, she said, because Kevin hadn't introduced anyone to the family in years. My mother was excited. She used the word serious twice in one sentence. Then she said the other thing. Kevin asked me to mention, and I want to be clear, this is his request, not mine. She paused the way she always pauses when she's about to say something she knows is wrong but is going to say anyway. He'd prefer if you didn't come to this one. I was standing in my truck in a parking lot off Maquila Trail when she said this. I remember because I'd just come from a site visit and my hands still smelled like wire insulation. He prefer, I repeated. He said Simone comes from a more, he used the word polished, background. Her family is in finance and real estate. He doesn't want her first impression of our family to be complicated. Complicated, I said. He specifically mentioned your work. He said he doesn't want to spend the evening explaining what a journeyman is. I sat with that for a moment. The heater in my truck was running. Outside, it was already dark, even though it wasn't yet 5 o'clock. That particular kind of December dark that settles over Calgary like a lid being pressed down. Okay, I said. I told him it wasn't fair, my mother said quickly. I know you did. He asked, and I didn't want to cause a scene before they even arrived. Mom, it's okay, I understand. She went quiet. I think she expected me to fight it. I didn't. I said I'd figure something else out for the evening, and I'd call her on Christmas. She said she'd leave a plate for me in the freezer. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said she was doing it anyway. After I hung up, I sat there for a few more minutes. I wasn't devastated. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this kind of story is supposed to go. The wronged person crying in their car, the swelling emotion. I was mostly just tired, not surprised. That distinction matters. Kevin had been embarrassed by my work since I got my apprenticeship. He came to exactly one job site in 10 years, a residential reno I was helping with in Cochrane, and he spent most of the time asking questions that were meant to sound curious but landed more like pity. So you do this every day. Doesn't it get boring? Have you ever thought about going back to school? The answers were yes, not really, and not for a second. But I stopped giving those answers somewhere around year 3. It took too much energy to explain a life to someone who'd already decided what it was worth. I spent the holiday at my friend Petra's place in Inglewood. She made a lamb roast and we watched the flames lose badly and her dog ate an entire dish towel, and we spent an hour calling the emergency vet line in a mild panic. It was, genuinely, a better evening than I'd had at my family's in years. I didn't think about Kevin or Simone once. I thought about them the following Tuesday. I was in my office, which is really just a spare room in my house with a drafting table and too many coffee cups, going through bids for a commercial project. A mid-sized building in the Beltline, new construction, the kind of job we've been slowly building toward for the last 2 years. The general contractor was a company called Hartwell Group. I'd worked with them before on a smaller project and they'd liked our work. This was bigger. A real step up. The project coordinator had emailed to schedule a walkthrough with the property owner, who was apparently very hands-on and liked to meet the subcontractors directly before signing anything. I said fine. I put it in my calendar for Thursday. I drove to the site Thursday morning. Hartwell's site super let me in and walked me through the space. We talked load requirements, panel placement, conduit routing through the ceiling grid. It was a good building, well-designed, the kind that makes the actual work easier because someone upstream had thought carefully about it. I was already mentally pricing the job out. About 40 minutes in, the door at the far end of the space opened and a woman walked in. She was maybe 30, professional-looking, in a long coat with a hard hat tucked under her arm that she clearly wasn't used to carrying. She introduced herself to the site's super, then turned to me. "Hi, I'm Simone. I'm the owner's representative on this project. My family holds the title on the building." I looked at her. She looked at me. I watched the moment she placed me. It was subtle, a slight tightening around the eyes, the smallest pause before her expression restabilized. "You must be the electrical contractor," she said. "I am," I said. "Nice to meet you." We shook hands. Her grip was steady. I'll give her that. We did the walkthrough. I asked questions, she answered them. The site super mediated a few points of clarification. Simone was sharp. She clearly understood the project and had done her homework on what needed to happen before they could move forward. I found myself, despite everything, respecting her competence. At the end, the site super stepped away to take a call. Simone and I stood near the main panel location. She was looking at her notes. "You do good work," she said, not quite looking up. "Hartwell mentioned you specifically." "We try." A pause. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I want to say that. I didn't know he had a sister in the trades." He said he described his family differently. I nodded. He usually does. "I wouldn't have. I want to be clear that the dinner wasn't my idea." "I believe you," I said, and I did, actually. She had the look of someone who was genuinely uncomfortable, not performing discomfort. "I don't have any issue with. I mean, what you do is." "You don't have to explain," I said. "We're professionals. This is a professional conversation. Let's keep it that way." She looked at me then, really looked. "Fair enough," she said. We racked up the walkthrough. I sent Hartwell our quote the next morning. Detailed, competitive, well-documented. 2 weeks later, we got the job. I didn't call Kevin. I didn't call my mother. I just booked the project into our schedule and moved on. I found out later, through my mother, who found out through Kevin, who found out through Simone, that she had mentioned meeting me. She apparently told him she'd run into me at a job site, that she'd been impressed, that she hadn't realized what works in the trades actually meant, in my case. Kevin called me on a Wednesday night in late January. I was on my couch watching a documentary about supply chains and eating leftover dal, because that is what my evenings actually look like, contrary to whatever version of my life my brother had invented. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Long pause. "Simone told me you're doing the electrical on the Beltline project." "That's right." "She said your quote came in really clean, that Hartwell spoke highly of you." "That's good to hear." Another pause. I could hear him trying to figure out what to do with the gap between what he believed about my life and what it actually was. "I didn't realize," he said finally, "that it was a whole company." "You never asked," I said, not unkindly, just plainly. He was quiet for a moment. "I want to apologize for the dinner thing." "Okay." I was being. "Yeah," I said. "You were." "I'm sorry." I let that sit for a second, not to be cruel, just because it deserved its own space. "I hear you," I said, "and I appreciate it, but I need you to understand something. I'm not angry. I'm not sitting here devastated. I spent Christmas with Petra, and it was a genuinely great night. What I am is, I'm just done explaining myself. I've been explaining myself to this family since I was 20 years old, and I'm 31 now. That's a long time." He didn't say anything. "If you want to have a relationship," I said, "it needs to be with who I actually am, not the version you've been telling yourself about." "That's fair," he said. "Good." We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing heavy. He asked about the project timeline. I told him we'd be on site by March. He said that was fast. I said that's how we operate. After we hung up, I sat there for a bit with the documentary still running in the background. Something about shipping containers and port delays. I wasn't really watching it anymore. I thought about the first job I ever ran. A service upgrade on a house in Airdrie. The winter I turned 23. My journeyman had called in sick, and the homeowner needed us to finish that day, or their insurance would lapse. I did the whole thing myself, start to finish, in the snow, and I drove home afterward with my hands shaking from cold and something that wasn't quite pride, but was in the same neighborhood. I called my mother that night. She said, "That's great, honey," in the same voice she used when I told her I'd aced the test in high school. I thought about year 2 of the company, when I had 2 employees and a truck and a line of credit I was terrified of touching. I thought about the project manager I hired in year 4, a guy named... Actually, his name doesn't matter. What matters is that I hired him, and the company started running differently, better. And I stood in the middle of a job site that was entirely ours and felt something settle in my chest. I thought about my apprentices. I have 2 right now, one who's 20 and one who's 22. The younger one, on her first week, said she'd heard trade school was a backup plan for people who couldn't get into university. I asked her where she'd heard that. She said everywhere. I told her to notice how much I charge per hour and to think about that next time someone used the word backup. She laughed. She's good. She's going to be really good. I didn't run into Simone again for a few weeks, and when I did it was on a site visit with a Hartwell super. She was professional. So was I. We talked about conduit placement and permit timelines and whether the mechanical contractor was going to cooperate on ceiling space. Because they never cooperate on ceiling space, and she nodded seriously and wrote things in her notebook. On her way out, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said. "I told Kevin he needs to stop talking about his family like there's something to manage." "How'd that land?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "About as well as you'd expect." I almost smiled. "Give it time." "Maybe," she said, and then she left. My mother called the following week to ask if I'd come to Easter dinner. I told her I'd think about it. She said that was fair. She also said Kevin had apparently started telling people at work that his sister owns a company. She said he sounded almost proud. Almost, I thought. But I'll take almost. Almost is somewhere to build from. I started the truck. The sun was up barely, just catching the edge of the Rockies on the western horizon the way it does on clear mornings in Calgary. That flat, cold light that makes everything look new. I had a site meeting in 40 minutes, a bid to finish by end of day, and 2 apprentices who were going to need me to show them something I hadn't gotten to yet. I pulled out of the driveway and got to work. There's something I've noticed about people who underestimate you quietly. They don't announce it. They just make small decisions that add up. A dinner you're not invited to. A description of you that leaves out the most important parts. A pause before they say your name around people they want to impress. Kevin never said out loud that he was ashamed of me. He didn't have to. Shame like that works through omission. What I've also noticed is that those decisions have a way of circling back. I didn't set out to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't sitting at Petra's place over Christmas running through some plan. I went home that night, fed my dog, and went to bed early because I had a site visit at 7 the next morning. That's the part people don't see in these stories. The part where the person who got left out just keeps going. Keeps showing up. Keeps doing the work, not because someone's watching, but because the work matters, and they decided a long time ago that it would. That decision is where everything starts, I think. Not the confrontation. Not the moment Simone walked through that door and recognized me. Those are just consequences. The real thing happened years earlier, when I was 20 and cold and hauling wire through an unfinished wall, and I thought, I'm going to be genuinely good at this. Not good enough. Good enough. That kind of commitment, the kind that doesn't need an audience, is the only thing I can point to that actually changed my life. And the intelligence piece mattered too, even if it didn't look like the kind anyone in my family was valuing. Knowing how a building thinks, understanding load calculations and fault tolerance, and what happens when you cut corners on a panel installation in a commercial space. That knowledge took years to build, and I built it deliberately, because I respected what I was doing enough to understand it deeply. You can't fake that, not on a job site. Not when a general contractor is standing next to you asking why your approach is different from the last company's, and you have to be able to explain it clearly and be right. What I keep coming back to, though, is the staying power. The years when the company was small and the line of credit was real and nobody in my family understood what I was building. The ability to keep going when the validation wasn't there. That's the thing I'm most proud of. Not the contract, not the moment Kevin called me, and couldn't quite fit the new information into the old story he'd been telling. Just the years of work before any of that, when it was only me and the job and the choice to take it seriously. I don't think Kevin is a bad person. I think he picked up a set of assumptions the way most people do. From school, from the culture around him, from a world that spent a long time telling people like him that a certain kind of work was a consolation prize. Unlearning that takes honesty. Real honesty. The kind that's uncomfortable. He's working on it, slowly. Simone, for what it's worth, treated me like a professional from the moment she placed her feet on that job site. Whatever adjustment she had to make internally, she made it quickly and quietly and moved on. I can respect that. And me. I just kept going to work. That's the whole story, really. That's all it ever was.